Howdy my totally as always tubular gamers, and we're back with, you guessed it, another ranking video, and today we are talking Bethesda. Yes, Starfield is among us and we are talking Bethesda games, but not just any Bethesda games. You know, Bethesda's had their name attached to a lot of video games. Today we are talking about Bethesda developed RPGs. Now Bethesda and RPGs just kind of have always gone together. Really, RPGs are what made Bethesda such a household name when it comes to video games. Games like Oblivion and Fallout 3 and of course Skyrim have really propelled Bethesda into the stratosphere when it comes to RPGs. And while we are talking about the stratosphere, we have the recently released Starfield, and so I thought, you know what, let's talk about all the Bethesda developed RPGs. Let's rank them all worst to best, give them all a little review, and see how they all stack up against each other. So we'll be looking at all of the RPGs developed by Bethesda Game Studios. Now Bethesda Softworks did work on a couple RPGs before Game Studios became a thing, like the first two Elder Scrolls, and those are RPGs, but we're really just looking at Bethesda Game Studios, which was established officially in 2001. So we'll be looking at Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, Fallout 3, 4, 76, Elder Scrolls Blades, unfortunately, and of course Starfield. Sadly, no Fallout Shelter here. I'm also not going to be looking at other RPGs put out by Bethesda, so something like Fallout New Vegas, that was not developed by Bethesda Game Studios, that was Obsidian. We're looking at just Bethesda Game Studio RPGs. We're going to be ranking these games based on their quality, how well they've aged, how much fun I've had with them, the plot, the writing, the quests, the combat. We're looking at kind of everything here. Now, I know making a video like this and a list like this is going to ruffle feathers no matter what I say, so I'm going to just put it out there. This is just my opinion. There might be some hot takes in here that might be the coldest of takes here. Either way, let me know down below whether you agree, disagree, whether you like the video, whether you think I'm stupid or I shouldn't even be talking about these games. Whatever it is you want to tell me, let me know down below. I'm pretty sure it doesn't really matter the order I have these games in. People are just going to be unhappy with this list. Another thing worth mentioning is I didn't grow up with all of these games. I didn't play like Morrowind and Oblivion back in the day. I played all of these games now in the modern day. And I think it's just worth mentioning that. What I'm trying to say is just let me know down below how you feel about this list or this video in general. I read every comment. Like, share, comment, sub. We got a Patreon going on as well since I got laid off. And you know, let's just get right into it. This intro has gone on long enough for sure. Pretty obvious what the weakest game on this list is, but yeah. And so here we have Elder Scrolls Blades releasing for mobile devices and the Switch in 2020. Now, if this was a mobile only game, I would not even be talking about it, but it was on the Switch. This is a free-to-play action RPG, and it takes place in the Elder Scrolls world. It very much is a spin-off. It takes place after Oblivion, but before Skyrim. And it sees you playing as a surviving former member of the Blades, an elite legendary group of spies and bodyguards. And you know, I'm gonna just get right into it. This game is not good. This game is not only not good, it is actually awful. I didn't play all that much of this game, and I don't intend to play another minute of it because what I saw was just, it was just terrible. So what even is this game? Like I said, it is an action RPG, but it definitely leans much more on being a mobile RPG than anything else. So you're dropped into this town, it's your former hometown, and you really got to restore it to its former glory. And how are you going to do this? You're going to do a bunch of quests for some characters, you're going to explore some dungeons, and you're going to get into combat. Now, any depth, any personality, any kind of lore or story or charm that the Elder Scrolls games are known for is just not here. It's very dry, it's creatively bankrupt, and it just feels tedious right off the bat. The quests really immediately feel like fetch quests, and that's all you really get in this game is fetch quests. And then you'll go into dungeons and you'll get into combat. The combat in this game is very basic. It is unexciting. It is boring. There is no depth, and it kind of feels at home on a mobile device, but on a Switch, oh, this is just terrible. This is just bad right off the bat. I'm like, oh god, this is just shit. You can't avoid the combat either. You really have to get into combat with everything you see, and any depth, any interesting combat options, or really any kind of way to deal with combat other than just immediately running up to them and attacking them with a sword. That's all you can really do here, and it was just immediately a slog. I was like, oh no, this is tedious, this is boring, this just sucks. Any kind of exploration or unique dungeons or interesting level design, yeah, that's just just not here. What you have is similar looking dungeons that feel copied and pasted, more so than even Oblivion's randomly generated dungeons, and I don't know how you do that. That's impressive, but these dungeons and really any sense of exploration, it's just gone. In terms of the RPG aspects, you can get different skills, I guess, that could make the combat more interesting, but I didn't get far enough to really explore any of these options. Something that immediately turned me off, and probably everyone else, is just the microtransactions. This game, when it comes to microtransactions, it's just awful. They are just sitting right there. They make you wait hella long to open some of these chests. It's just, the microtransactions are just ridiculous in this game. Free to play or not, this is out of this world ridiculous. I don't care that this was some stupid mobile game and they push this all the time with mobile games. This is a Switch game. Like, are you kidding me? The microtransactions, it's just awful. The presentation sucks. This game, I've already talked about it enough. There's just really nothing good with it. Poor combat, poor design, story, characters, uninteresting gameplay, and again, it just seems creatively bankrupt. I think that's like the best way to describe it. This is not an Elder Scrolls game. This is some mobile game with the Elder Scrolls name thrown onto it and is not worth anyone's time. And here we have Fallout 76 releasing in 2018. Where do I even begin with this one? With the disastrous launch, the terrible collector's edition, the baffling decisions like no NPCs when the game initially released, all of the live service garbage and its annoying microtransactions. There's a lot to say with 76. Now, don't get me wrong, the game has certainly gotten quite a bit better since it launched, but it's still full of issues. Let's start off with the story and the premise. It's actually not a bad premise at all, being a prequel to all the other Fallout games and taking place not that long after all the bombs dropped, and then the story is about dealing with this new world, its problems, and really trying to save the wasteland. Sadly, the main game was made with no NPCs in mind. While the premise is good, the actual story and storytelling is very, very dull. It's a lot of holotapes, terminals, and robots. There's really no real characters here outside a handful of robots that have little to no personality. The free DLC like Wastelanders fix this a little, adding some NPCs to the game, but these don't really affect the main quest, and it still feels incredibly lifeless and sad. They were implemented into the main quest in like the most basic way. At the very least, I can say that the lore and the world building is actually pretty decent in this game. I thought it was alright. It was the best part of this entire part of the game, the story, writing, characters, etc., because it just wasn't very good outside of the world building. But speaking of the world and atmosphere, it just feels incredibly lifeless, and the open world itself, I just find it exhaustingly big and somewhat empty. Like, this is one of the biggest open worlds I've ever seen in a video game. It is massive, and it keeps getting bigger and more keeps getting added as the game's getting updated, but I just didn't think it was anywhere near as interesting as Fallout 4's world, and the same can be said about the quests and progression in this game. In fact, the whole gameplay could kind of be said about that. It's just incredibly uninteresting, unimaginative, and drab. Like, if you didn't like Fallout 4's gameplay to begin with, you're not gonna like this, just straight up. But this game, when it comes to the gameplay, really, it's fetch quest after fetch quest after fetch quest. Like, yes, it is a multiplayer game, it is live service, it is cool that, it's kind of like an MMO light, and it's an online Fallout game. That novelty is still there, but the gameplay, it's very live servicey. It's just fetch quests over and over for the most part, and a lot of the game just has you traveling all over this map just a little too much. The game is significantly more quests than legit any other Bethesda game made, to an obnoxious degree, and they're not the most creative, innovative, imaginative, really any of those words. They're just kind of there. Now, when it comes to non-quest related gameplay like the gunplay, it's actually pretty okay. It's not amazing, but it's serviceable. The guns have a decent feel, and the enemies are as bullet spongy as ever. I mean, look, the gunplay, it's passable. VATS is different because it's online, and I'll just be real, it sucks. It's bad. Now, the game also has a heavy emphasis on survival with its crafting, base building, and water/food management, and I think these are all good. It's actually one of the few areas this game is good. It's actually well implemented for the most part, with hundreds of plans for creating different things to consume, and base building being a lot better than Fallout 4's. It's actually fun. I think that the survival mechanics are actually well done. The leveling up system has a unique twist with these cards that give you these little perks. These seem fine, but they kind of seem rife for microtransactions, which this game has way too many of. This game is quite aggressive with its microtransactions in the Atom Shop, where you can accidentally buy stuff since it doesn't ask you to confirm anything. It just feels very in your face and kind of predatory with this shop. In fact, while speaking of in your face issues, we have the graphics, the presentation, and general stability of this video game, which are all terrible. terrible by like every metric. This game arguably looks worse than Fallout 4.
16 times the detail.
Terrible, if not some of the worst lighting I've ever seen in a video game. Awful frame rate and just long, like really long loading times with muddy textures, outdated character models. Like from a presentation standpoint, it's just terrible. The game is also super buggy on not only its graphics but its gameplay as well. The online functions seemingly barely work at times, where I couldn't even join my partner, she couldn't join me in our quests, and there was just plenty of times where the quest just straight up glitched out and there was seemingly endless bugs. And then there's all the things missing from not only a good Fallout game, but a good Bethesda game. Good storylines, interesting characters, a good VAT system, real companions, any kind of karma system, real dialogue options, because the ones thrown in the DLC, yeah, no, those are just awful. Maps given to you inside a building, some basic navigation, free fast travel, which, yeah, you actually have to pay for the fast travel here. The list just kind of goes on and on. Like, I really can't imagine how bad it was at launch. And you know, they still are updating the game. They're still adding new stuff, and there's new seasons, and it continues to be a solid enough live service. And you know, this game, despite all my issues, I'm not going to come out here and say it's a terrible game, but I wouldn't say it's very good either. Like, there is some decent fan service here. There are some interesting side quests. The survival mechanics are alright. The gunplay is serviceable. It's just the game lacks in so many other areas that it's really just the definition of a mixed bag. On top of it being a live service filled to the brim with microtransactions, aggressive for the most part microtransactions, yeah, I just can't really recommend this game, sadly. Not even to the biggest Fallout fans. Like, we just deserved so much better than this game in so many areas. You know, at least the radio slaps. The radio, I'll have to give some props there. The radio is actually quite good in this game, but it's one of the few things, it seems. And so that's 76. Hopefully I didn't talk forever about this game. Anyway, on to the next one. And here we have the latest of the Bethesda RPGs, Starfield, finally releasing in 2023 after many delays. How is Starfield? After all those years of development, after all the hype, after Microsoft putting everything into it, how is Starfield? It's alright. Honestly, when it comes to a game like Starfield, opinions have been all across the board. I've heard some people say that this is one of their favorite games all year. They put 100 hours. It's one of the best games Bethesda's ever made. And I've heard people say that this is one of the worst games they've played this year. It's incredibly boring and they didn't like it. I fall kind of in the middle, you know. I think Starfield is a good game. I absolutely think it's a good game, and it's got a ton of great elements to it, but there are a few things that really hold it back from being truly great, in my opinion. And I'm not coming at this game with some kind of agenda. I don't have a hate boner for Microsoft or Xbox or the fact that the game asked me about my pronouns. I couldn't give a shit about any of that. I'm just looking at the game as a game. Now, something I do like about this game is the story and the setting. You know, it takes place in the far future, where we're able to travel all over space, go really wherever we want, and the game starts with you as just this little miner doing nothing important when you come across some artifact that is going to really change your character's life, and they end up joining this program called Constellation, which explores the deep regions of outer space. It's really just about them being explorers and learning about the artifacts and just what exactly is out there. I actually like the story. I think it's well written, it's interesting, and it kept me intrigued throughout. I think that the setting is actually really cool. There's not many games that have this kind of setting, and I think Starfield does a lot of interesting things with its world. I think the world and general story and storytelling is one of the better parts of Starfield. But I really did like the characters to the point where I really did want to see what was going to happen to all of them, and I generally enjoy the companions. Look, are the companions as good as, say, Baldur's Gate 3? No, Baldur's Gate 3's companions wipe the floor with this game's, but I still like the companions. They're better than the Outer Worlds, I'll give them that. When it comes to the world, story, characters, the plot, the writing, the dialogue, I really don't got any issues there. I think that's all actually pretty good. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, Starfield, you know, it isn't too different from other Bethesda RPGs. You are dropped into this massive world and you're just really given the freedom to explore however you want. Here, though, it's in space, so you'll be traveling to a bunch of different planets rather than just going off into a random direction and seeing what you find. And while you're exploring around, you'll come across plenty of different things, like the quests, whether it's one of the game's main factions, some random person you find that you want to help, or it's one of the main quests, you know, with the artifacts. There's a ton of different quests here that you can find on, you know, the main planets, not the random planets. There's a ton of different combat in this game, whether it's in space and you're blowing ships up, or you're finding people that just don't like you, or creatures that want to eat you. There's plenty of combat here. There's some RPG elements as well. It's more along the lines of Skyrim Oblivion rather than Fallout with its leveling up and RPG elements. And then of course there's the customization like the ships or your character and really just taking in the world. Now Starfield, like I said, it does a lot of things really great. Let's start with the positives here. Let's talk about the combat. You know, it is a first-person shooter when it comes to the combat. It's much more in line with, say, Fallout 76 when it comes to the combat. However, I will say the combat in this game, I think it's actually pretty good. I think it's the best combat in any Bethesda RPG. The guns are satisfying. They feel nice. There's a bunch of different weapons. There is some customization how you want to go about the combat. Again, it just feels nice. Look, is Starfield's combat going to hold up to like Doom or any of the Wolfenstein games? No, it's not. But those are full-on first-person shooters. That's their focus. Starfield's isn't only the shooting, and I think the shooting is actually pretty good in this game. I did like the combat here. I think it's one of the strongest aspects of Starfield. Plenty of enemies are still bullet spongy as hell, but generally speaking, I think the combat and the gunplay is good. I think combat when you're in the spaceship is also decent. It's not amazing. It's not Star Fox. I wish you could do like barrel rolls here, but it's still satisfying to blow up other ships and take their stuff. Speaking of taking stuff, I think the scavenging and the crafting is pretty decent here. I wouldn't say it's as good as 76's with all those recipes and stuff, but it's fine for what it is. I think the RPG elements are decent enough. The dialogue system is fixed from Fallout 4. It's much better than that game. I think the dialogue system is actually pretty good here. I think the checks are nice. Persuasion is good. And the whole skill trees, yeah, it's okay. I don't think it's super intuitive, but I think the leveling up and putting skills in is decent enough. And you can have some really different builds. You know, you can actually have a role here. There's different factions to join, and most of the factions are interesting and different from each other. I think the role-playing mechanics are good here. They're better than Fallout 4's and 76's even. And another thing I kind of like is the exploration in the major cities. This feels kind of like the older Bethesda games where you can go into a direction and find random people and events and quests going on. This, yeah, I kind of like it, but now we move to the things I don't really like about Starfield, and that's exploration as a whole. The exploration in this game, in my opinion, is just incredibly weak, and it's a shame because that's one of Starfield's major points, is exploring the unknown, exploring space, and in my opinion, it's just not worth it. I didn't find very much that was interesting. In the major cities, yes, I think exploration is decent. I wouldn't say it's as good as really any other Bethesda RPG, but it feels like the older games. It's decent here. You'll find something interesting. In most of the areas though, i.e. the planets in space, there's just nothing. These planets that are randomly generated are just a waste of time. There's like resources and stuff to scan and the occasional artifact temple. I just didn't like these randomly generated planets at all. And then space, there's really nothing out here but the occasional enemy to take out. There's just nothing here. In the major cities, there's a little bit more going on and it's decent there, but for the most part, I just didn't like the exploration. I didn't like fast traveling all over the place. I like one big cohesive world that I can explore, and Starfield doesn't feel cohesive or immersive at all. There's so many loading screens everywhere, so many pauses. It's ridiculous. You know, I expect it from Skyrim. I expect it from Fallout 4, but nowadays, really, with our technology, there's all these loading screens and pauses everywhere. Like, it's a bit ridiculous. Yeah, not a fan of the exploration. And then I'm not a fan of the quest design either. Well, I think the characters and the dialogue keep the quests, you know, kind of interesting. The design themselves of the quest, like what you're doing in the quest, I just didn't really care for these. It almost always feels like a fetch quest. It almost always is a fetch quest. Why does it feel like we've taken steps back from Skyrim and Fallout 4 when it comes to the quests? They're just not that interesting. It's always go get this, go get that, go kill this person, come back to me, and it feels like there's just nothing else ever thrown in here. There's almost no variety, and the main quest is just littered with these. The main quest is like the worst quest line in the game. All the other ones have a little bit more interesting stuff, but that main quest line, man, getting those artifacts, it is so lame. The quest design being bad really compounds the issue of the exploration not being great. Why would I want to go explore if the quests I'm getting aren't really all that good or interesting? The story might be interesting for them, but the actual quests themselves just aren't. Now let's talk about some other issues. The user interface just sucks in this game. You spend way too much of this game in menus. It felt like I spent like a third of my game in menus. The shipbuilding menu is not very good either. In fact, just building anything, the menu isn't very good. Being encumbered happens just way too often in this game. It's really annoying. There's no maps in these locations. You know, you can look at like a general map of like the planet, but some of these actual areas, there's just no map. Like, why did we get rid of maps for like interior buildings and stuff? Areas that aren't randomly generated. Why is there no map? This is just silly. The game also doesn't tell you where the major cities are, so if you forget where one of them is, you gotta go figure out which planet it was even on just to fast travel to it. There's so much fast traveling in this game, and again, it just doesn't feel cohesive. Something else that doesn't feel cohesive and breaks immersion is all the bugs. The AI a lot of the time are just dumb as shit. Not only your companions, but like the enemy AI will just stand there and get mowed down, and it's like, really? Come on now. I have had a few game breaking bugs. I had a bug at the very beginning of the game where Barrett couldn't get out of the ship, and so I had to restart the area like at the very beginning of the game, what you would think it's play tested the most. Like I mentioned, the game has some issues, but to end on a high note, at least presentation wise, I think the game is solid. It does look very good in some areas it doesn't look very good. The game didn't run particularly well on my computer, and the game would look even better if they were on Unreal Engine, but they are insistent on this old ass engine. The music, pretty decent too. It clearly wants to be like Fallout 4, but I think the music's alright here. It has some good, it has some bad. It certainly has one of the weakest starts to any Bethesda game. Seriously, the first couple hours are not the most enjoyable here, which is a shame. I'm sure plenty of people turn this off after the first few hours, but you know what? I still think the game is worth trying. It's on the Game Pass. Check it out there. While this game doesn't hold a candle to other big RPGs like Baldur's Gate 3 or Cyberpunk, I still did enjoy my time with it. I'd rather play this than 76. I won't lie, I was a little disappointed in the end with Starfield, but like I've said a few times now, I still think the game is good, just not great. And so here we have the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, releasing originally in 2002. Now before you all get the pitchforks out, it is worth mentioning again, I didn't play this game back when it came out. I don't have some fond memories with it. I didn't try it even until this year, and I don't have a shit ton of experience like some people do with this game. But yes, here I have Morrowind, one of the biggest RPGs of that generation of games. It takes place in Vardenfell, an island in the land of Morrowind. Now, when it comes to explaining Morrowind's story, plot, characters, etc., Morrowind has a ton of different quests and storylines, but the central plot revolves around the Tribunal, these godlike beings ruling over Morrowind and their struggle against a former ally. And the player begins in this small town, fresh off a boat from a mainland prison, freed by string pulling of their current ruler of the Tamrielic Empire. And the player is tasked with meeting someone from the Blades, a secret mysterious group of spies and agents working for the Emperor and the Empire. And that's all I'm really going to say when it comes to the main story. See, Morrowind, there are so many stories. All the Elder Scrolls, there's tons of stories in these games, and the main quest is oftentimes not even the best story. Now, while a lot of Morrowind has aged in many aspects, something I think that hasn't really aged is the storytelling, the story itself, the characters, and the world. Like, I think this is all really quite timeless, and it's all very good. I think the main story is interesting, I think the side quests are interesting, I think the writing is still pretty decent, the voice acting... Yeah, the voice acting is kind of whack, but the world, the atmosphere, and the world building, I think it's all very strong. Like, this game, it definitely has a really good atmosphere that early 2000s games have. You know what I mean, though? That early Y2K aesthetic that I just really can appreciate it, and I really like it here. I think the presentation, it's strong with this one. At least with like the art style. The fog can be kind of annoying. But when you come to the gameplay of Morrowind, it's not the most different from the newer Elder Scrolls games. It's just a lot less refined and feels much more D&D inspired than, say, the other Elder Scrolls games. The beginning of the game, it starts with your character creator. And the character creator for the time, yeah, it's decent enough. And then after the intro area, you're pretty much just dropped into this giant world where you can just absolutely explore it to your heart's content. Like, it's a very massive open world with few constricting boundaries. Like, from the beginning of the game, really, you can go anywhere you want. You're left to roam, steal, quest, explore. And I know what you're thinking, this sounds a lot like Skyrim, but no, it was way back here, they were doing it too, and I think that's quite impressive for the early 2000s to have such free-form design, and it feels a lot like D&D in that sense. In D&D you can go off and do whatever the hell you want, and in this game, yeah, it's really the same. I mean, there's the main quest, but I wouldn't be surprised if a ton of people don't even bother with the main quest and just go off and find interesting quest lines and people and just get into a bunch of nonsense. While exploring the world, you'll get into fights, you'll level up, there's a bunch of RPG elements, and of course you'll be doing quests for people. Now, when it comes to the combat in this game, you'll regularly get into combat, and this is one of the aspects where the game has aged the most. The combat in this game is quite rough to come back to. It is quite clunky, and it takes quite a bit of time to get used to. I think if I say quite again, I'm going to explode. But yeah, it's clunky. And you know, obviously, depending on how your class is built, the combat's going to be a little different. But most of the time, you're going to have some kind of melee weapon. You're just going to be swinging away at enemies. And this does not feel good at all. It is not satisfying. It is not engaging. It is not fun. It is just there. You know, you just kind of hack away at enemies. You have some spells as well, and the combat's just not very good in this game. Like, don't get me wrong, Elder Scrolls and good combat or engaging combat doesn't really go together all that well, but it certainly does not go well here. Like, the combat, it exists. It's a part of the game, and I'd rather not talk about it. And before you go, mods make the combat much better, much more tolerable. I played the game vanilla. I don't think I should have to mod it to make the combat good. It should just be good by default, and this is not. Enough about that though. Then we have the skill system. So this game, very similar to all the other Elder Scrolls games. You know, your player's proficiency with a skill is increased through practice, training, and study. I think like the best example I can give is how to raise your weapon skills. Really, you just want to strike an enemy with the appropriate weapon enough times and you'll level up the skill. And you know, even back all the way in the early 2000s, I think this was an ambitious system, and I think that it's actually decently well implemented here. Like Daggerfall, the game does make a distinction between attributes and skills, and attributes are improved when the player levels up. Skills, though, you get to choose between a ton of different skills here that you can level up when you level up. And I think all of this is a more than solid enough system. Like, it really does feel like a role-playing game. You can't have a character that's super raw at everything or is good at everything. Like, depending on how you build your character, you're gonna have strengths and weaknesses. I think it actually pays off. Certainly feels a lot more like D&D and Baldur's Gate, but you know, I think it is a good system. And then all of this comes together with the exploration. This game has a ton to see, ton to explore. The world itself is rather large and there's many ways to get around it, and you'll get quests from NPCs, and these quests, this is maybe where the game is aged the most. The game gives you no objective marker. It doesn't even give you a general area, and you know, call me a zoomer, call me a kid, but I found it a bit hard to navigate this world at times, and it was hard to complete quests when I don't know where to go without a walkthrough, and the journal in this game sucks ass, giving you pages upon pages of information, and it's like, I just want to know where to go. I just want to know where I'm supposed to go and what I'm even supposed to do. Like, the NPC told me, but that was like 5 hours ago. I've done so much other stuff, I barely even remember. Call it my shitty memory, but some reminders would be good. In this journal, like, you just gotta go through so much to find what you're actually looking for, and it can be quite cumbersome. The UI can be a little cumbersome as well. I mean, it's old, so I'm gonna just throw that one a bone, but it takes a bit of time to get used to. In fact, this game in general, it just takes a bit of time to get used to. And you know, a lot of people love this style of game. They love how just immersed you get. And this game, it really feels like it's from a different era, because it is. It's totally from a different era. And coming in here with modern sensibilities, yeah, you're going to kind of tear the game apart. You're going to go, I don't know where to go. The combat's shit, and the skills, they could be a little confusing. But, and a big but here, like a nice big fat round ass, but if you have patience, if you give this game some time, if you have a walkthrough loaded up, you absolutely can have a blast with this game. You can have a ton of fun with this game, just getting lost and immersed into this world. The atmosphere is unparalleled. It's incredibly well done. There's so many interesting factions, quest lines, characters, and it's just so nice to be in. Like, it's great to just vibe in this game. Not many games I can say it's great to vibe in here. It's great to vibe in Deus Ex also, but it's really nice with the Y2K aesthetics, and I enjoyed my time with it. Did I absolutely love it? Was I head over heels? No. But I could totally appreciate what this game was doing. The game has also had some expansions. There's tons of mods as well. I don't really have much experience with either of those. But what I can say is there's absolutely a reason why so many people love Morrowind to this day, and there's a lot of people who consider it the best Elder Scrolls game. Do I think it's the best Elder Scrolls game? No, I prefer the newer titles. I'm also a newer gamer, but I still think that this is a very good game. I think, though, you're going to need a lot of patience. You're going to need to set your expectations here and really just be prepared for an older game, because that's really what it is. I think that almost all of the issues with this game stem from the fact that it is an older title. And yeah, I'm sure there's mods that fix every single issue I've ever mentioned with this game. They even make the graphics way better. And so if you play it with all the mods and the better graphics and all that, maybe this is the best Elder Scrolls game. I didn't play it that way. I just looked at vanilla for all of these games. Again, I shouldn't need mods to make the game good. It should be great to begin with, and the mods can make it even better. But with all that, I still recommend Morrowind. I still think it is worth trying, just you gotta set your expectations with this one. And so here we have Fallout 3 releasing in 2008. Now, after Fallout 2, the Fallout series had a bit of a shaky history, you know, it was kind of all over the place and people weren't sure if there was ever going to be another one until Bethesda picked it up, and then people went, oh, is it just going to be Oblivion with guns? But I'm so glad it's not. So while Fallout 3 is the third main game in the series and it does reference the older Fallout games, you absolutely do not need to play the older games to understand this one, but it certainly pays off if you have. The game takes place in 2277 and it takes place in the city of Washington, D.C., and it really is a post-apocalyptic wasteland. After the bombs dropped, the whole world just got kind of ravaged, and a lot of people were put away in these vaults. That's where you begin. The first 19 years of the player's life is in this vault where you never see the outside world, you never hear anything about it. You just try to grow up and have a normal life until one day, all of a sudden, your dad is gone. Yeah, your dad has left the vault, and so you leave the vault to go after him, and it's a really crazy world out there. That's all I'll say. I think the story of Fallout 3 is actually really well done. I actually do really like the story still of Fallout 3. Sure, in the end, it isn't the most different from like the original Fallout, but I still really do like the story, and I like the factions. You know, the main two factions in this game are the Enclave and the Brotherhood of Steel. And I know there's always going to be a group of people that say Bethesda ruined Fallout, they never understood it, they didn't understand the Brotherhood, they ruined XYZ, but hey, I still really enjoy Fallout 3's story for what it is. I think the world building is really well done, I think the lore is good, it does pay a lot of homage to the original games, and I think it's generally done in a pretty decent way. What I'm trying to say is I like the story, I like the characters, I like the dialogue, the writing, I like the amount of options you get, I like the different factions, I like all of this. I think it's actually all very well done. Now when it comes to playing this game, it isn't just Oblivion with guns, but it is similar to Oblivion in many ways. You know, you're dropped into this pretty big open environment, you can really go just about anywhere you want from the beginning. And really, you can do whatever the hell you want. You want to go kill some raiders, you want to join the Brotherhood, you want to go take a bath in a radiation pit, you want to nuke Megaton, go ahead, do whatever you want. The game absolutely is open in that sense. I wouldn't say the game is as open as Oblivion, but it's still rather open-ended, and you can go explore all over the place, and you'll find plenty to see. And what's great about Fallout has always been the choices. You can make different choices to almost every interaction. I was surprised with how many different choices there actually are for a lot of these quests, especially at the beginning. At the beginning, there's tons of different options. You can go about quests in plenty of different ways. You can be evil, you can be nice. Karma is a real thing in Fallout 3. Like, if you have negative karma, people are not even going to want to talk to you. People aren't going to want to trade with you. They're going to just ignore you. Or if you have good karma, you know, they might give you something. They'll at least like you. They'll tolerate you. I think the karma system is decently well implemented. I'm glad it's here. I didn't find any really easy ways to game it. I'm sure there are plenty and people have found them out, but I thought it was actually implemented well. So, you know, being in a wasteland where there's just a bazillion things to kill you, you're going to get into combat. The combat in Fallout 3 is probably the aspect of Fallout 3 that's aged the worst outside of maybe some of these ugly-ass environments, but the combat, while it hasn't aged great, I still think it's alright. I'd rather have this than Oblivion's. The gunplay, it's decent, it's serviceable, it's functional, it's fine. I wouldn't say this game holds a candle to most first-person shooters, but at least it's kind of satisfying. You know, you can tell when you hit an enemy and the bullets impact them. It could be worse. It could be a lot worse. It's okay. It's certainly better than the melee combat, which is basically just Oblivion's, and it's not very good. Something that makes the combat a lot more tolerable is VATS, which is where the game freezes and you can like target body parts and shoot them. And then depending on your stats, depends on how likely you are to hit or how much damage you'll do, all that good stuff. I think VATS makes the combat just a lot better. I still think it's pretty cool how your limbs actually can be targeted and they can be damaged and you'll have to heal them individually, and if say your legs break, you're not going to be able to walk like anywhere, or if your arms break, you're going to have trouble holding weapons. I still think that's a pretty neat detail. Overall, the combat is alright. Now, something that I think has actually aged quite well is the RPG aspects to this game. I think that this is a very solid role-playing game. There's not only a bunch of options during conversation, but there's a bunch of skill checks, there's different ways to go about quests. I already brought up the karma system that I think's well done, and I'm sure there's always going to be people saying that Bethesda simplified Fallout's RPG elements and they dumbed it down, it's nowhere near as complex as Fallout 2, and no, it's not in a lot of aspects, but I still really do enjoy the RPG elements elements. I think that this is a solid role-playing game, and I was thoroughly engaged really the entire time. I think the quest design is incredibly well done. I love how many different options there are. There's a good amount of replayability as you can go with different factions. The game does make you pick a side. You can't be friends with everybody. That just doesn't happen. And you can get some really different outcomes depending on what you choose during some of these quests or certain key events, and I really do enjoy that. I think it's well done in Fallout 3. On top of that, I think the world design and just the atmosphere is incredibly well done. It's very realized from the older Fallout games, more so than Fallout 4 and 76. This game definitely got the vibe and aesthetic from the first two games a lot better than those games did. Not that those games don't have great vibes or aesthetics, but this really nailed the Fallout 1 and 2 feel, at least I think it did. On top of that, I am a fan of the presentation. Sure, in many areas it has not aged well, it does not look good, some of the environments look like shit, but that's kind of the point. I mean, the world was ravaged by the bombs, it does look like shit, and I gotta give them some credit. They at least stuck to their guns and let it look like shit. Graphically, I think it's fine. When it comes to the sound, the voice acting, it's a little suspicious, I won't lie, but at least the radio's nice. There's some good tunes here. And when it comes to general stability, I played on PC. I needed just a quick fix to make it work on my Windows 10 PC, but other than that, the game ran just fine. I didn't have any major issues or frame rate problems or bugs or anything like that. It really did seem like a generally smooth experience. Maybe I'm in the minority here though. Overall, Fallout 3 is a massive, excellent RPG that I have no problem recommending to fans of Fallout, people who like Elder Scrolls or Bethesda RPGs, really just RPGs in general. I think this game, most people will like it. Sure, it has aged in a few areas, but I don't really think it's a big deal. I think the game is still very playable nowadays. It's very accessible, and I just had a great time with it. It's a sprawling open world with a ton of content. There's a number of DLCs for this game. I've played through all of them, and I really do like the DLCs here. I even like whack-ass Mothership Zeta. I mean, that shit's just hilarious, but I do like the DLCs. The DLCs I can give a solid thumbs up to. Fallout 3, big thumbs up. I really think everybody should try it at some point. Even if you don't really care for RPGs, you might like this one. This very well could be the game that converts you to an RPG fan. I've seen it happen plenty of times. Either way, I recommend it. And so here we have Fallout 4 releasing in 2015. Now, I very much remember when Fallout 4 came out. I was very hyped, very excited for it. I remember I took school and work off that day just to play Fallout 4. I really did. I was so excited for it. And all these years later, I still do love Fallout 4. I know plenty of people have hour-long videos talking about why they don't like Fallout 4 and it's a bad RPG, etc., etc. But man, I love Fallout 4. Does the game have some issues, some aspects I don't really care much for? Yes, it does. But on the whole, I still think Fallout 4 is a really good game. So Fallout 4 takes place in a pretty similar environment compared to Fallout 3, ravaged wasteland. This time it takes place near Boston and other parts of New England. It's called the Commonwealth. And something cool is at the beginning of the game, you actually do get to see the bombs drop and then everyone hides away in the vault. And then, many, many years pass by until you're awoken from your cryogenic sleep and you actually witness the murder of your character's spouse and kidnapping of their son. And so you head out into the Commonwealth to go find your missing kid. And I think the setup is actually really great. I think the setup and the story is really good in Fallout 4 until the ending. I'm one of those that thinks that the beginning's great, the middle's pretty good. Unfortunately, the end, I won't lie to you, it does kind of fall off and it's nowhere near as good as the beginning, but at least the initial setup is good. I think the game's story is relatively good. Just once you get to the end, it's just not great. But what I do think is great? The world of Fallout 4. I think it's actually really well done. It's not only quite different from Fallout 3, but I think it's one of Bethesda's better done worlds, It's not just a retread of older Fallout games, like the Brotherhood of Steel is here again, but there's plenty of new factions like the Institute, like the Minutemen. I actually do like them. I think they're all pretty great. And sure, some people don't like that another settlement always needs your help or that the Railroad and the Institute are kind of just shoved in there at the last moment, but I really did like the factions in this game. I like everything they're about. Something else I really like about the story is the companions. There's companions in Fallout 3. They were karma locked, sadly, but there are companions in Fallout 3 that add personalities, but in Fallout 4, they really went all in on the companions. I really do enjoy the companions of Fallout 4. When I think fondly back on Fallout 4, I think of the factions and I think of the companions and their stories. I think it's the best companions and the best stories for companions that Bethesda's ever done. Not even close, in my opinion. They're just so good. Now when it comes to playing Fallout 4, it isn't all that different from Fallout 3. You're dropped into, yet again, another big open world that you get to explore to your heart's content. It is different from Fallout 3 and the world itself. It's not just a retread of an apocalyptic wasteland. This place is rather different. Everything's dilapidated here rather than just destroyed. And so you get out there, you explore, you find a bunch of new areas, you find some crazy people that want to kill you, you find some people that don't want to kill you, and you get quests from them, you find companions to join you. You do get into plenty, and I really do mean plenty of fights, whether it's robots or other humans or monsters, mutants, creatures. There's a bunch of shit trying to kill you here. Of course, there's all the radiation. There are some RPG elements here, albeit a bit toned down from Fallout 3. There's a lot more looting here. There's crafting. You can upgrade weapons and armor. You actually do get a settlement and you can build that settlement. There's like constructing. You can actually create kind of a home where all the companions live and everyone who joins you. This is cool. It's not the most well implemented, I won't lie to you. The building isn't great in this game, but it's a neat addition. But really the core gameplay is still go off in a direction, go explore, go find people that want to kill you or people that you want to help. That open-ended gameplay is on blast here, and I love it. I really do enjoy the gameplay of Fallout 4. I think the gunplay is significantly improved over Fallout 3. The guns actually feel nice. You can ADS unlike Fallout 3, which is great. I think there's actual impact here. The guns have a decent feel to them. The enemies show that they actually get shot. You can still target all the limbs. VATS returns and is great. I think the gunplay, it's not, amazing. It's not going to hold up to most shooters. I mean, Doom's going to wipe the floor with this game, but I think the shooting, it's generally alright. Melee combat's still ass, though. As you explore around, you'll find plenty of things to pick up, and unlike Fallout 3 where picking stuff up didn't really get you much outside of being able to sell it, there is a lot of crafting here, and you can upgrade weapons and armor and make better shit just from finding stuff all over the world, incentivizing you to actually look at what's around you, which I think is pretty cool. I think it's decently well implemented. 76 certainly has it better in this aspect, but it's still good here. And then we have the RPG aspects. Look, when most people talk negatively about Fallout 4, they usually point at the RPG elements, and I won't lie to you, it's dumbed down and it's simplified from Fallout 3 and the Elder Scrolls games. It really is simplified for almost no good reason. Like, they got rid of the karma system, which seems just kind of silly, and the dialogue options are just kind of a joke. Like, your character can actually speak, a first for the series, but these dialogue options just suck. They tried to make it like Mass Effect, but in the end, what it comes down to is yes with Smark, no, or repeat the question, and those are really the only choices you get. I've never liked the dialogue system of this game. It is rather weak, but I'm not going to say it's god-awful or something like that. The skills and leveling up has also been dumbed down a little. It's a lot easier to just level everything up, and a lot of the skills transfer over and seem similar. It's just not as robust, and there's not as much role-playing as, say, Fallout 3. And of course, the choices in the end don't matter as much as they did in, say, Fallout 3, especially when it comes to that ending. It's one of the reasons I don't really care for the end of the game. And it's a shame that they took this direction with some of the RPG elements. I don't really know why they took this direction, to be honest. They didn't need to get rid of karma, and they didn't need to make the dialogue so simplified. The game still has, I think it's some crazy like 110,000 lines of dialogue or something. Like, why did they make the dialogue system like anyway? The RPG elements, they're a bit lacking, but I think the gameplay overall is still really a great time. You still have this big open world to explore with tons of quests, and there's a lot of great quests here as well. A good story for the most part, solid gunplay, and an addicting loop that sees you just wanting to play more and explore more of this game. And there's a bunch of replayability still, checking out all the other factions, especially because the game does make you side with one eventually. Like, I've played through Fallout 4 more than once because I wanted to see what happened, and every time I played this game there's been plenty of bugs. Yeah, the game is quite buggy and the presentation is a little shaky. The music's great, the voice acting is good, but the actual graphics, they're not so hot. There's some really shaky looking environments. Shaky as in not looking very good. The frame rate's kind of sus, especially on console. And yeah, the game could certainly look and run better, but I think it's not the worst, not the biggest of deals. In conclusion, maybe this is one of my hotter takes, but I still really enjoy Fallout 4. It does have some shortcomings, it's not perfect, and, for an RPG it certainly is lacking, but I think this game does a lot right. The gunplay's good, there's a nice open world to explore, there's a lot of great stories here, a lot of memorable stories here. I still really enjoy my time with it, and that's without bringing up the DLC, Far Harbor, which is also incredibly good and honestly deserves more credit. Is it for everyone? Clearly not. I've seen plenty of people call this game dog shit, which I disagree with. I recommend the game. If you like Fallout, if you like RPGs or shooters, I think you're going to enjoy the game, or at least enjoy aspects of the game. but it's certainly not the be-all end-all of RPGs. It's not that, but it still is a good game. And here we have the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, releasing initially in 2006. Now, Oblivion is, like many Bethesda games, one of the most beloved RPGs probably of all time, and it doesn't really matter where I place it on this list. People are probably going to be upset with me, so sorry. So the game takes place in a different region of the Elder Scrolls world. It takes place in the fictional province of Cyrodiil, and the game's main story focuses on the player character's efforts to thwart a fanatical cult known as the Mythic Dawn that plans to open portal gates to a demonic realm known as Oblivion. And while that's the main story, just like every other Elder Scrolls game, there's tons of different factions and stories and quest lines in this game. And when talking about Oblivion and its story and plot and characters, just focusing on the main story is really doing yourself a disservice. Look, Oblivion has, again, a ton of different quest lines, characters, stories, arcs, and it's actually really well done. Oblivion not only has some great writing, but some excellent world building and some of the best side quests, side plot lines I've ever seen in an RPG, like the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood. Like, not only is the world building really well done, but the dialogue, the writing, and just how everything plays out, I think it's actually really great. And it's arguably better than the main plot. The main plot is fine, the Gates of Oblivion is cool and all, but it's those side storylines, it's the factions, it's all of the non-main quest stuff that really got me intrigued, and I'd say it's some of the best side content in any video game. Like, if I could recommend one aspect of Oblivion, it really would be the side content. Now, when it comes to the core gameplay, it really is just an extension of Morrowind, where you're dropped into this large, dense open world and you just do whatever the hell you want. That open-ended gameplay is here in full effect. You can go do side quests, the main quest, interact with really any NPC, dispatch monsters, develop your character, go dungeon crawling, travel literally anywhere in the province at any time. The game basically never ends. It also does have a fast travel right from the get-go, so you can really go like anywhere you want. It's just as open, if not more open than Morrowind. You can go to actually like whatever you want. But when you start the game, you create your character. It's very similar to Morrowind's. You choose between 10 different races, each with their own attributes. And, as you play through the game, you will level up your skills. It's very similar to Morrowind and other Elder Scrolls games. When it comes to leveling up, the more you do something, you'll level it up. And while I still do think this is a great system and it allows you to really roleplay, Oblivion does have level scaling that was incorporated to maintain a constant and moderate aspect of difficulty, but this is one of the flaws of Oblivion, is that the level scaling combined with the leveling system, it makes it really easy to unbalance the game and to make it way harder than it absolutely should be. And some areas just become damn near impossible if you haven't been leveling up the correct skills, or you're not leveling up like combat-centric skills. And it can even incentivize you to not level things up. The level scaling can be so whack. And yeah, mods, you know how it goes, can fix the level scaling and all that shit. But the vanilla release, yeah, the level scaling, it's a bit whack. It's one of my, if not like my biggest issue with Oblivion, but I still would say that leveling up and the whole RPG aspect of it is still good. Okay, to get off the subject of leveling up and RPG stuff, let's talk about the combat. The combat in this game, it is upgraded from Morrowind. It feels a lot nicer, it's a lot smoother, there's no stupid dice rolls where you're just constantly missing. It is better. It is quite a bit better, actually, than Morrowind. Is it good? I wouldn't really say it's all that good. It's functional, it's serviceable, it's decent, it's not terrible, it's not great. You have at least a decent amount of options, and when you swing your sword, you can tell you're hitting something the entire time, but I wouldn't say it's satisfying. It's not all that engaging, but I absolutely would not say the combat is bad. At its worst, it's just kind of mediocre and it can be a chore and a little bit of a hassle, but for the most part, I think it's fine enough. It's not broken, it's not dysfunctional, it's not unenjoyable, it's just kind of there. It's certainly a step up from Morrowind, though. Along the way, though, you're going to find plenty of different things to fight. Imps, goblins, bears, wolves, other humans, other creatures. There's a bunch of shit to fight in this game, so you'll get into quite a lot of combat, and, at least you'll get used to it if you really stick with it. At least like the rest of the game, it is relatively open-ended and there is customization on how you want to go about combat. I mean, if you want blunt melee weapons, you can do that. If you want spells, that's an option too, or maybe a bow and arrow. There's a bunch of different ways you can at least go about it to mitigate it and make it at least a little bit more enjoyable depending on your play style. But you know where you'll find all of these creatures to fight? In the dungeons. You know, a lot of the quests in this game have you going into dungeons or retrieving an item or talking to somebody or bringing something back. You'll spend a lot of time in the dungeons in Oblivion. Now, Oblivion's dungeons are pretty much randomly generated, and you can immediately tell as there's just a bunch of different copied and pasted rooms all over the place. Look, the dungeons aren't very good in Oblivion. If it's not the whack level scaling, it's the dungeons that is my biggest issue with Oblivion. I just never really liked the dungeons in Oblivion. They felt kind of soulless and were relatively dull, to be honest. I mean, it just never excited me. I was never engaged. I generally didn't enjoy the dungeons, and I don't think that's really a hot take. But while I might not care for the dungeons or the combat in certain aspects, what I can absolutely praise is the world design, the actual level design that is not randomly generated, the quests you get, the characters you interact with, again, the writing, the story, all of that is really great. The world design is spectacular. It's actually really well designed, it's really dense, there's a lot to see. The quest design is actually really well done. It's some of the best Bethesda has had in any game. Really, the quests and the world and the characters and all of that, it saves Oblivion. It makes a game that's, you know, pretty alright to great. When you hear people look fondly back on Oblivion, they're always talking about the Thieves Guild, the Dark Brotherhood, the other side content, because that's the best part of Oblivion. It's some of the best Bethesda has ever done when it comes to side content, when it comes to quest design and world building. On top of that, the game is a great aesthetic. It looked pretty good for when it came out, but it just has this cozy feeling that I can't really explain. You just know it when you see it, and I love how it looks, and you know, the presentation for the most part is fine. The voice acting is hilarious, I won't lie, but I quite like the aesthetic and the presentation. It's not perfect. The game also does have plenty of bugs, but I still think Oblivion, it's aged incredibly well, and it's still a really good game. You know, that quest design, the stories, the side content, it's kind of timeless. It'll always be good. You know, the combat and the dungeons and all that, it might not always be great, but the quest design, the characters, the stories, that's always going to be good, and I have no problem recommending Oblivion. If you've never tried it, if you like RPGs, or you love Skyrim, this is a great game. And here we have the coldest take imaginable. We have the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, which I believe to be really the best RPG that Bethesda's ever made. I know it's not an exciting take, but it's really just what I feel. You know, it doesn't really matter how many times I've booted up this game, Skyrim just always manages to impress me. And really, what is there left to say about Skyrim? Like, really, what am I going to add that's new to the conversation? I could just end the video right here. I'm not going to do that, but I really could. You know Skyrim, we all know Skyrim. I remember when it released on 11/11, and I was there day one, really excited for it, like everybody at school was, and then the game was re-released again and again and again, numerous times, and I've gone back to it just way too many times. I feel like generally the game is a pretty decent improvement on Morrowind and Oblivion in many aspects, and you know, while there are a few things that I think Oblivion actually does better than Skyrim, I would still take Skyrim over Oblivion really any day. The game takes place in the land of Skyrim, and the story focuses on your player's character, the Dragonborn, and their quest to defeat the World Eater, a dragon who is prophesied to destroy the world. I mean, we all know the story, we know the memes, the Dragonborn, Fusro Da, arrow to the knee. I mean, Skyrim's story, the main story, it is pretty solid, I do enjoy it, but just like all the other Elder Scrolls games, there's a bunch of other stories with the guilds and factions and just random people you'll come across. And I think all of this comes together to create one of the most interesting game worlds of any video game. I really do enjoy just about all the stories in this game. All the factions are great. I think that there's a bunch of good stuff here. A lot of people say that the guilds and factions were done a lot better in Oblivion than they are in Skyrim, and you know, to some extent I agree. Like, I think the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood are better in Oblivion, but I still really enjoyed them in Skyrim as well. I certainly like the main story of Skyrim more than Oblivion's. The Gates of Oblivion are cool, but I don't know, something about the dragons, I really enjoyed this. Generally though, the story, the writing, the characters, all of that, I think it's really well done. I think it's the best of the Elder Scrolls series. You know, there's a lot of good world building. a lot of lore, and I think the world is, yeah, it's just really engrossing. It's really easy to get into it and just find yourself lost in all the stories that Skyrim provides, and really that's what the gameplay is all about. They didn't even change much from Oblivion, which didn't change much from Morrowind. They really just drop you into the biggest open world that the series has really ever seen and just say, go at it, do whatever you want. Explore wherever you want to explore. Go meet any faction you want. Go get into any fight you want. Like, go buy a house. Go do the main story if you want. But you can really just do whatever the hell you want. And, you know, it doesn't really matter how many times I've booted this game up. Every time I do something different. It feels like every time I start a new game, I go into a different direction and I find something new, something I didn't see before. And I mean, the game just has a ton of replayability just based on what you want to do, who you want to side with, who you want to help. Maybe you missed a quest here or there, go back. Like, the game just has a ton of content. Skyrim is a massive game. Like, it was massive for the 360 era. It's still massive nowadays. Not many games have even come close to the amount of content that Skyrim has. So many quests, like just tons and tons of quests, and a lot of them are actually really good. I do like the quests of Skyrim. I will admit, you know, sometimes Oblivion had a little bit better quests, but I think for the most part the quests are very good in Skyrim. I think the characters are great, the story's great, the way the game progresses is solid. I really don't have many complaints there. But something Skyrim really improves on from Oblivion is the combat and the level design, specifically the dungeon design. You know, the combat in Oblivion, I mean, it was tolerable, but it did kind of feel like a chore at times. In Skyrim, it is a bit better. It's not like this massive improvement over Oblivion, but it's a little bit better. The weapons feel better, getting into fights is a bit more engaging, and then the biggest thing is there's a lot more customization and options with how you want to go about the combat, more so than any other Elder Scrolls game. I actually really like how many different options there are when it comes to the combat. You can have magic in one hand, melee weapon another, two-hand magic, you know, sword and shield, bow and arrow. Like, I like the customization for the combat. You can really go about it in just about any way you want, depending on how your character's built. Is the combat going to win any awards? Is it spectacular? Are the dragon fights legendarily awesome? No, absolutely not. But it's a little bit better than Oblivion. I like it more than Oblivion's, and again, I thought it was enjoyable for the most part. But when it comes to level and dungeon design, it is much better. I really love the world of Skyrim. I love how it's designed. It's intricate, it's dense, it's just really fun to be in and vibe in. Like, I really enjoy the world of Skyrim. And the dungeon design, you know, all the dungeons are like handcrafted, none of that RNG shit. They're so much better, so very much better, with puzzles and interesting elements and traps and enemies and story around the dungeons. I really do like the dungeons here. I think the dungeon crawling is just way better than the previous games. Now, when it comes to the RPG elements, the game really rests on its laurels. It does not reinvent the wheel here at all. It's one of those, the more you do something, the better you get at it, and the game dropped that whole level scaling bullshit. It scales just fine. The game is never exactly a challenge. I mean, it's Skyrim, you're not really going to come in here with a challenge, but it never gets like super unbalanced. I like the RPG system. I like leveling up. This is the most fun I've ever had with the system. I think it's really fleshed out, and you can really build your character how you want to build them. You really actually get to, you know, play a role in the role-playing game. What a concept, I know, but I really do like Skyrim's role-playing elements. I think the combat's fine, the world design's great, I like the quests, I like the story, the presentation. I always thought the presentation was pretty good. I mean, it didn't look, you know, spectacular, but it looked good and it ran alright. There was a lot of bugs back in the day, but most of them have been fixed now. There's been numerous updates to the game with the re-releases to make it look better. I think the game is a solid presentation. I love the atmosphere and the vibe. Like, all the Elder Scrolls games really have a great atmosphere. Oblivion might have the best, but Skyrim is really good also. Look, like many other people, I really could be here all day to tell you about my time with Skyrim. Talking about the combat, the many shouts, how many ways you can go about scenarios, the story, the world, all the many bugs I've had, fighting the dragons, getting a horse, buying a house, the DLC. The DLC actually slaps in this game also. Like, I could tell you so much about Skyrim. We could be here all day, have a ranking video, ranking my favorite moments in Skyrim, the DLC in Skyrim, or we could really be here all day is what I'm trying to say. Skyrim is just so much. Not many games have come out after Skyrim that have had as much content as Skyrim does. Like, there's a reason Skyrim is so legendary, it's so loved, it's one of the most acclaimed games of all time. Yeah, I know people are pretty sick of it at this point and really want Elder Scrolls 6, myself included, but you know, Skyrim just fucking rules. Like, there's no other way about it. Even the biggest haters, I'm sure, gotta admit some things are right with Skyrim. Like, it's just an excellent game. But that is where I'm going to end things. You know, I'm getting pretty hungry. It's late in the day at this point. I've talked a lot about Bethesda games. We're well over an hour long, and so all I gotta say is if you made it to this part of the video, comment Hamtaro is in that old anime series. That's how I know you made it to this part. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Took a lot of time to make this video, so yeah, thank you very much. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day, weekend, whatever it is you're celebrating is coming up next, birthday, holiday, whatever. Have a good one. Bye-bye.